In breaking news today, South Africa's President Jacob Zuma has resigned. Highly criticized for the many corruption charges he faces, Zuma survived several no confidence motions in the parliament. The opposition parties tried hard to get him impeached, and the general public mood was against him for a long time. However, it is only when his own party, the African National Congress, gave him an ultimatum recently, replacing Cyril Ramaphosa as its leader, that Zuma finally buckled under pressure. He said he was quitting with immediate effect, but said he disagreed with his party's decision. Sami Dosani of Peace Vigil talked to Pooven Moodley, a South African activist and campaigner.
Hi folks, this is Samir from Peace Vigil, and I'm joined by my friend Pooven Moodley, who's a campaigner and activist here in South Africa. Pooven, we've just heard the news a few hours ago that Jacob Zuma, the president of South Africa, has been forced or has resigned after being told to resign repeatedly from multiple sources. What's your initial feeling about that?
Yeah, I mean, it's something we wanted for many years now. And, you know, there are many actions to try and get him out through the courts, through the Constitutional Court, by being on the streets, and then obviously opposition parties, you know, trying to get through motion of no confidence through the parliamentary way. So in many ways, it's, I guess, a relief, but it has been quite a long struggle, I guess, and a journey, and a lot of damage has been done, you know, during the time he has been president. So yeah, on the one hand, it's relief, a bit of hope, but at the same time, the feeling that, you know, there's still a lot of work to be done because, you know, it wasn't just Zuma, it was a whole collective, you know, that were pushing an agenda that didn't serve the country. So I think there's a lot more work that needs to be done in terms of the cleanup going forward.
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about that work? I mean, do the prospects seem better? We have, as you know, economic inequality at levels worse than during the apartheid era here in South Africa. We have many issues that date back to apartheid era problems. Is there a chance now to resolve some of those in a more meaningful way than there was under Zuma, or does that not change much with Cyril Ramaphosa coming in?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing is to stop the rot in the sense of, you know, what's happened over the last few years in terms of siphoning out from the country, you know, key resources by individuals linked to the Zuma kind of cabal. You know, so stopping the rot, I think, is the first step. Obviously, bringing back, you know, the money and the resources that has been stolen. So prosecutions and, you know, the hawks using the law to basically pull back the resources. I think that's important. But then the third part is looking at, you know, getting rid of those people that were part of the project. So there are many ministers involved, many people at local government, and obviously key people outside of government. So, you know, ensuring that in the first instance, you know, those people are out of the system and that they are prosecuted as well as a starting point. In terms of fundamental changes to reduce inequality and deal with some of the structural problems in South Africa, you know, I don't think using the same model that we have been using is going to shift things fundamentally. And, you know, my sense is Cyril will continue to use the kind of macroeconomics that we have been using since, you know, the fall of apartheid. And if we don't deal with some of the fundamental questions like the land questions and ownership of productive assets, you know, there isn't going to be a massive shift. So in some ways, you know, things that would stimulate the economy, like, you know, in the sector of energy, you know, community ownership of renewable energy as an example, will really help, you know, start to shift in terms of inequality, but also who has access and ownership of productive assets in South Africa.
Fantastic. There was also a bit of a almost a racial angle to this particular corruption round, in the sense that one of the key people, or one of the key families that Zuma was accused of being associated with, was the Gupta family, who came from India just a few years ago. As a South African of Indian origin, what are your feelings on that story?
Yeah, I mean, my feeling is that criminals are criminals, irrespective of what race group they are in, or where they come from. I think what we have here, not just in South Africa but in other parts of the world, you have families that are siphoning out resources from countries. And therefore, you have the kind of levels of inequality globally, and obviously in South Africa as well. So for me, it's, people of Indian origin in South Africa, isn't a cohesive group. Through history, there've been people that have been fully engaged in the liberation of this country. As an example, from South Africans of Indian origin. Some are business people, and some are really corrupt and racist as well. So I think it doesn't serve South Africa. For people to see this as something that's quite generalized or, portrayed in that way. In this instance, it's pure criminality. And, to make the point that, South Africa refusing the Dalai Lama to come in, but giving the Guptas permanent residence, by bending the law or the minister using his discretion, is just, one example of how far things went. But that's purely on the fact that the Zuma family were benefiting from this arrangement.
Thanks so much. Along those same lines, we now have our first, or we will have in a few hours, our first South African president from a very small community. We've had presidents from the Xhosa community, who are the first two, Mbeki and Madiba, and we've had, of course, the current president Zuma from the Zulu tribe. What's your feeling on having our first Venda, our first person from a much smaller tribe? Is that even relevant in today's South Africa, or is it a positive or a negative?
Yeah, I mean, I think tribal issues have been used as political tools in the past, and specifically within the ANC, and has always been a big issue in the past in terms of which tribal group leaders are coming from. But I think a lot of it has been used as a political tool or football. And yeah, my sense is people in South Africa are, tired of some of those political games. And what they want is really the basics: jobs, basic services, and essentially for the country to work. And my sense is if Cyril can, move the country in a direction where the country works, where the basics are in place, where people, have their dignity, then I think, tribe is going to matter less. It's more, I think now, South African society is at a stage of wanting delivery, rather than an accountable government, as opposed to tribal issues. I mean, those tribal issues will always be there, but it's a question of how much people actually use them, politically.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Pooven Moodley, activist and campaigner here in South Africa. Thanks so much for your time.